obviously, COVID has changed behaviors and specifically renter behavior. Now, to capture the changes in renter lifestyle preferences as a result of the pandemic, Local Logic compared the first quarter of 2020 versus the fourth quarter of 2020. So, Pierre, like, what was the result of that analysis that you came up with?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is, and I just want to, caveat this, the top three things didn't change. What changed was their order, right? And so specifically, it was public transportation and grocery stores, well, like and schools. Those are the top three things that people care about when searching for a place. We track about 17, depending on the market,
Yeah.
and those top three, there was basically a swap between grocery stores and public transportation, which was super interesting, and obviously clear about what's happening in the market. Still retained top three status, but it was a big drop in terms of like percentage. Like it went down about, I think, 24%. Comparatively. So it's one of those things where I think the long term vision of this is like there's a certain set of workers that don't need to transport that don't need public transport, right? There's a certain set of workers that don't need public transport. They know that. I'm one of them. I'm one of those people who did actually take public transport on a regular basis, and now I will never have to again. Done. and
Interesting.
and it's by choice now, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't have to go into my office anymore. No, but the problem is most jobs don't have that flexibility yet. So I think that's why we're seeing it still stay as a top three thing. But for a certain kinds of workers, they now have gone with, hey, you know what, I need to be closer to grocery stores. That was always a top three. Now it's a number one. And it's just, it was, I mean, I can't tell you during the pandemic how painful it was to go to the grocery store, but you also wanted to go quickly and get back. Right? You didn't want, and so it
Yeah.
became so clear, like, oh, thank God I chose where I live, and thank God I made those decisions, like when I picked this place, because had I optimized solely for public transportation, I would have been in a really bad spot. And I think that's the thing that people sort of realized is you need to optimize for like your lifestyle as much as your needs to get to work.
Now, do you think that order has kind of almost codified and is going to remain almost permanent, or do you think it's going to go back and forth?
It's tough. I mean, look, you heard what Andy just shared, right? I'm certain that those 18 buildings that went up in Vancouver were all around transit, right? Like and at the end of the day, like many jobs still require people to go into the office. I think that's obviously something that, but we can see that being a trend that, long term, I think is not the reality. And so, but people also still don't want to have, it's going to be here, it's going to be real, but I think the transport, people still want transit, and I think once the vaccinations go out, once people feel comfortable being out and about, like I will take the train again. I'm not going to until we're all vaccinated, but I
Sure.
will take the train again, and I won't drive into the city once or twice a month. I will actually take the train in once I feel that it's safe to, and I think at that moment, I think people will be way more willing to ride transit and will now reprioritize it again, at that time.
Sure. And so I'm going to turn to Matt. On the flip side, on Rentals.ca, have you noticed any differences in search behavior as a result of kind of what we've kind of gone through?
Yes. I think the biggest thing is people are looking for bigger spaces, to set up their office, and they can find that. One thing that we've saw the Rentals.ca, the search volume substantially increased for cities outside the big metros, such as St. Catharines, for example, or Guelph and Waterloo, um, and that continues to be true. So I think going forward, we're still going to see that a lot of folks are realizing, what Pierre touched on, that they don't have to do the long commute downtown anymore, that they could find a bigger space to live for possibly the same prices they're paying in downtown or even cheaper. So that's the biggest thing takeaway that we've continued to see is this a search volume outside the big metros that again I think is going to hold true into 2022.